How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk. Guys, today we're going to dive in deep in flattery. We're going to talk about how flattery is used as a manipulative tool, and not just in a prison setting, but a lot of this could apply to the real life setting, real world setting. And the reason why I thought this was a timely topic is because Netflix did release the Casey White, Vicky White relationship, which was developed inside the prison system or the jail system. And actually, it looks like what could have led to this developed relationship was a comment that Casey White said to Vicky White about her posterior. Basically, he said she had a nice ass, and that could be considered flattery. And that kind of what opened up the door. So the question is, how do the inmates or whoever decides to be that manipulator, how do they know when to employ that tactic? What is it that they look for in a target? And I think that's something that me, Joe, and Russ can discuss today. So, but before I get into my guest, real quick, got a couple books on the market. We have Inmate Manipulation Decoded and Breaking Boundaries. Both these are available right now on Amazon. And I got about 5 more books that are available at Blue 360 Media. The link to all these books are in the description. We have Managing Inmate Behavior. We have Effective Report Writing for Corrections. This book just got out. It's a great book, very informative. We also have How to Succeed in Corrections, Lessons Learned While Working in a Prison. Then we have Tips for New Correctional Officers and Their Supervisors. And we have also Unlocking Your Leadership Potential. All right, let me get Joe on here. All right, Joe, what's going on, brother?
What's happening, brother?
Joe, you mind introducing yourself, please?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. My name is Joe Pomponio. I'm a retired lieutenant at the Texas Department of Corrections, 29 years and 6 months. I'm currently working as an assistant jail administrator in our jail division at the Sheriff's Department here in our local county, and a panel member here for Tear Talk.
Yes, and we love having you. And now let me get Russ. Russ, what's going on with you, sir? Let me get Russ.
Officer.
What was that, Russ? You ready? What's up, Russ?
I'm ready. I'm ready. I was in the middle of a thought.
Oh, what do you got, Russ? Mind introducing yourself to our audience, please?
I don't mind at all. My name is Russ Hamilton. I am a former and retired sergeant from California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Started at San Quentin way back in 1989. I've also worked as a senior juvenile correctional officer, and I currently work for a private company that does reentry and rehabilitation work for a local county jail where I am the case manager, and for a local probation department.
And it's always good having you, Russ. So obviously, today we're going to be talking about flattery. And guys, real quick, flattery, usually when someone looks to kind of manipulate someone and use flattery as a tactic, it's usually someone who needs attention or someone who needs validation. That's why I have a list of areas right now that we're going to go through real quick, in which manipulators, so in our world, maybe inmates, in your world, it may be a little bit different. It's not going to be inmates, I don't think. But with that said, we're going to show you certain areas in which we feel that they may try to toss a compliment, but it really does matter on what they perceive is going to be a vulnerability in that target. So there are going to be some targets that love attention, targets that, basically love those physical compliments. And trust me, inmates or skilled manipulators, they know which ones seek attention, and they know exactly how to provide it to them. Like in this case with Vicky White and Casey White, believe it or not, even though she wasn't very outward with it, there was something that Casey noticed about her that, he knew that she would probably take this compliment well. And basically that's kind of what started the dialogue. You also could find that years back with the Joyce Mitchell case. Basically these inmates give it a shot, but it's a very calculated shot. It's not just a simple roll of the dice. I mean, they understand, what the loss is going to be. They could get written up, disciplined, but most of the time when they create that shot, when they go for it, they know something about that target, and they pretty much almost can guarantee how that target is going to receive that level of flattery. And by the way, real quick, guys, and we'll get to it, but in the prison setting, when an inmate flatters you, whatever the case may be, whether it's you smell nice or you look good, you got to let it be known to them that this is behavior that you're not going to tolerate. You're not going to quietly accept it either. You're just not going to tolerate it, and they have to know that it's because you won't tolerate it, not because you're an officer, not because you work in corrections, or not because, it's the rules. It's because you are not going to tolerate it, because you don't want to give them any caveat that makes them think that without that context that the behavior would still be acceptable. But before we go into the different areas that they could flatter in, I'll start with Joe first. Hey, Joe. Hey, real quick, Joe. Obviously, we do have people that seek attention, and we do have people that may seek validation. I think inmates are very skilled at understanding when to employ whatever type of flattery is needed to kind of meet each box.
Yeah, I mean, inmates' job is to size every employee up when they come in, whether the employees know it or not. So, the minute you hit the floor, they're already looking at you. They're sizing you up. They're looking for weaknesses. They're looking for ends, and they have 24/7 to work on that. And if you go in with the mindset that you're seeking some sort of internal or external validation, they will find it and they will use it.
Yes. And what's your thoughts on that, Russ?
That's just, pretty typical of what we see. And sometimes I think maybe in the Casey White situation, that was probably a little more targeted and directed at a specific outcome. Sometimes I think that I see, inmates doing things where they just kind of throw things around and seeing what sticks to who, and seeing if they get a favorable response, and it can be a favorable response of any kind. It can be the kind where, hey, just, maybe this guy's going to, let me have an extra meal, all the way to, hey, maybe I can corrupt this individual into bringing in dope or taking me completely out of here, like happened with the White scenario. So it just, sometimes if you're just, what's the word I'm looking for? Sometimes I believe they just explore, where the vulnerabilities are, and they may see them ahead of time, or they just may try and test and see if they're there. I think probably with the Casey White situation that, he tried a couple of things out, and you start little, you start where you can come back from the edge. Hey, I see you got a new haircut, to that haircut looks nice, to wow, that haircut really looks good on you. And it's a form of incrementalism. And if you don't stop at the first one and you don't stop at the second one, chances are you're going to be waved on through.
Yeah. And guys, remember, when it comes to manipulation, flattery being a tactic, it is about control and then ultimate power. I mean, that's the key. It's control first and power. And we'll talk about how flattery is it's very strategic in its nature, because if you have people that, let's say, the target, and guys, this could apply in the real world as well. If you have a target that yearns for that attention or yearns for that validation, then basically the manipulator has a way to control you. They have a way to give it to you and either withhold it or take it away. And basically withholding it is basically, I just stop, flattering you, or taking it away is doing the adverse, is basically insulting you or dehumanizing you. But I want to let people know that I know a lot of people may think, well, you know what, I can keep that boundary, because that's the goal. You want to create boundaries. So anytime an inmate goes to comment about anything physical with me, I know exactly how to put them in their place. And that's good. That's what we want. But believe it or not, flattery goes way beyond just the physical appearance. There's other areas that inmates can use or manipulators can use to open the door into flattery. And it doesn't always have to be the physical appearance. Remember, guys, these inmates know you, or these, the people that decide to manipulate you, they know you. They've observed you. So they know exactly, maybe it's through the discussions you're having or whatnot, what areas you are most vulnerable in. So with that said, I have a few. So, and I do believe flattery is the most common form of manipulation. Flattery, or it could evolve into love bombing, but definitely flattery is probably what's most commonly used. And I think it's because most of us, when we get caught up into it, we actually like how it makes us feel. It's an outward form of manipulation that makes us feel good. It's a lot different than guilt tripping, let's say, where guilt tripping it makes you feel bad. Flattery makes you feel good. So a lot of us welcome flattery. So with that said, just before we go into the other one, just to finish up on physical appearance, you know, these are things that people, the manipulator will think, well, you know what? In the case of Vicky White, whatever it was, Casey White knew so much about her when he employed it, because later on one of the phone calls, she even mentions that she wanted to be a stripper. You know, so he knew something about her, or maybe it was in like some prior dialogue before he, like Russ said, before he crosses that bridge, that he knew that this was going to be received. And most of the time, to be honest with manipulators, they usually try to build some level of closeness. Like Russ said, it's incremental. So they know that basically when you finally decide to cross that line and introduce that small compliment, you're pretty sure that will be guaranteed that it will be received well, because you've already worked a pretty good relationship out with that person in order for you to try to employ it. Would you agree with that, Russ?
Yeah, I mean, these are things where I would say, like in that case, you know, she gave him the exact ammunition that he needed, because you know, she says, "Oh, I want her to be a stripper or whatever," and says, "Oh yeah, what would your stage name have been?" And so, and that form of incrementalism, you know, it's stair stepping, where it just, you know, she decides she's going to give him a little bit in order to receive a compliment back. This is a form of quid pro quo. And, you know, I don't know how much she decided that she was going to dance around on that, or if she'd already decided that she was going to commit to it. But, you know, it's little pieces of information like that she baited him, or allowed herself, maybe would be the proper way to say, to be baited in, because she was obviously manipulated. But there's just, you know, a whole host of things that can be said there. And so those are the things that we have to prune off in order to not go down, you know, stupid rabbit holes where we can just, you know, end up in problems like that. So I hope people can see, you know, how that gave him, though, the inroads that he needed to be able to push those final buttons.
Yeah, and guys, I just want people to know the strategic application for flattery is really the manipulator's effort to control it. So whether they're providing it, and they provide it in excess, because that's the key. The more I give you, the more I can take away, or the more I can withhold. And then what happens is, eventually, if you do have someone that, let's say in this case here, likes the attention, because I think of the physical appearance part, it's definitely someone that likes attention. Then the thing is, if you don't get it every day, like the person's been giving it to you, then you start to wonder what you're doing wrong. And it's that part of the game that really gives the control over to the manipulator. So basically, if that person connects with it, if the target, because the target is the one that gives the meaning to the flattery, they're the ones that it's the target who will internalize it. So with that, if the target internalizes it in such a way that they connect their self-esteem to it, and the manipulator knows that, they know when that connection's been made, you know, they know it, then the moment they go to take it away, the target is going to look to regain it, because there's a piece of that target with those compliments that you're no longer given. Would you agree to that, Joe?
Yeah, you know, in this instance, you know, I don't think she was manipulated. I think she knew exactly what she was doing. I think she had the intention all along. You know, regardless of her rank or how far she came. I don't know what her personal history was like, but you know, it's odd to go from, you know, phone calls and compliments and, you know, talking about sexual innuendos to an escape just that quick. So my personal belief is, I don't think she was manipulated into this. I think she went in there looking for it. I think for whatever reason, she locked eyes with this inmate and had an infatuation with him just from the jump. And I don't think it took much to spark that flame.
And that's funny. I wonder who did cross the boundary first, because Netflix shows you the one comment, but you don't know. And I agree with you, Joe. You don't know why the inmate would think that comment would be allowed. So there's got to be a dynamic beforehand. So with that said, so we have physical appearances, right? So physical appearances is usually the very superficial. And I think this is probably the ones that's most, they're one of the ones that are most commonly used, flattery in general, but physical appearance is definitely, inmates do try that, or manipulators do try that. But you also have manipulators, especially in our profession, that will also try to complement your skills or abilities. So the manipulator may praise the target's professional skills, talents, or intelligence, and it's over complementing these abilities that can inflate the target's ego, gaining their favor. It's funny because in corrections, and again, I don't know how this will apply in the real world, but in corrections, we're not used to getting good job, and a pat on the back. A lot of us just kind of do the job because we know the job has to be done. But we do still feel that, and I think like most people do, we do want to feel appreciated. Appreciation matters. Not superficial recognition, but appreciation matters. And I think in a profession like corrections, and again, maybe this could play out in the real world, however you guys decide to apply the dialogue here, is that there could be times where we yearn it. And I think that comes with validation. I think that's more than that. This may go beyond attention. This is more about validation in my mind, where, you don't get the compliments if you're doing a good job. And here you are working your ass off and, no one's giving you the compliments, and, maybe you need it. It's not superficial. Maybe you need it just to kind of know that you're going in the right direction. I think that's the big thing. It's not, I don't need it to be recognized, but maybe I need it because it would be good if I know that I'm headed in the right direction by what I'm doing. That would be key. And sometimes inmates or manipulators may be very keen in knowing that this person is truly defined by their work ethic. You could see it every day. They're truly defined by their work ethic. So maybe there's a way I can go ahead and maybe start using that to my advantage by complimenting how good they are at their job, in a hope that they're going to receive that because I don't see anybody else doing it. What's your thoughts? I'll start with Russ first on that.
So yeah, this is a tricky thing, and I think that sometimes when we start talking about the manipulation aspect, we go right to the potential for undue familiarity, which is often coupled with a romantic or sexual relationship. But I think that that kind of is a little bit short-sighted, because sometimes inmates just want to build some type of firewall between them and bad things that might happen, so that they have a way to get out of things. It's kind of like paying it forward, paying it into the bank. And so they'll run around and they'll compliment people and whatnot. And I see this a lot inside because I spend a lot of time in the correctional venues online, where an officer will just start talking about, well, the inmates, in my block, in my dorm, in my section, they all respect me, and that's where, I just want to, hey, throw laundry out on the field, timeout, flag on the play. Why are we seeking validation at all from inmates? Yes, I guess it's good to have respect, or to at least be able to leverage some type of rapport that you have. And people know how much I hate those two terms, but we're going to talk about those two R terms anyway. You have to be doing this job not for the respect of the inmates, not for the rapport that you develop. You have to be doing it for the right reasons, which are about your oath and raising your hand and the idea and the philosophy behind the badge and everything else. So don't get caught up in an inmate telling you, hey, you did a good job of talking that guy down, or stopping this inmate from committing suicide, or whatever it is, And I'm sure that there is a level of that may be genuine when an inmate sees you doing a good job. But you don't have any way of knowing that. You're not able to, and it wouldn't matter if you did. You can't be out there, seeking the applause of inmates for a whole host of reasons. But when we get down to this thing about when are they going to set the hook, they're letting you run with this thing. And sooner or later, it's time for you to pay them back for those compliments. It's time for you to pay them back for, some little favor that they did for you. And so these are just all ways, to get up inside your head and to pull you out of your prescribed role.
Love that. And you know where I actually see this played out a lot? So this is very hard to redirect. It's not as simple as the one where if you're complimenting my looks, it's very quick for me to get right on top of you and tell you how this is not acceptable and basically begin my argument. This one is unique because it kind of falls into your prescribed role. And obviously the inmates, they're going to let you know if you're doing your job okay or not, but I like what Russ said. I'm really not dependent on you telling me if I'm doing my job okay, or if I'm good with my job, if I have the skills to do it. I'm not yearning for that. So it may be something where you may quickly receive. I appreciate that. And you keep it moving because the biggest thing here is if that becomes something that you're dependent on, like basically, oh my God, because my supervisor, doesn't give me compliments or whatever it is, or my supervisor is going off on me. My peers are going off on me. So who's the first person I'm probably going to go vent to? It gives me a chance to go vent personally now to some extent to the inmates, because if they're the ones that are complimenting me on my skills and I got the adverse with my peers and my supervisors, it really does open me to go to the inmates because I need to save face. If that makes sense. I mean, it's not the right move, but I need to save face. So what happens here, it opens up the door for that connection to start to begin if I take that skill and ability compliments way past face value, if I start to internalize that. What's your thoughts on that, Joe? Because there is a lot there too.
Yeah, a crook is a crook is a crook, and there is no better car salesman than a crook. They pitch things out there, and it may be an innocent statement, or it could be something that, they're putting in their bank for later on that they can collect on, they, like I said, it's at this stage where they're mostly car salesmen, well, sure, I can absolutely get you that $400 a month payment, but you're getting what you want. And that car salesman eventually is going to get what they want. They may screw you for a 14% interest rate and get one hell of a bonus, but you got your $400 a month payment. And inmates are the same. They don't just issue compliments. Whether it's physical appearance, skills and abilities. Without having some sort of end game. There's eventually there's going to be something that they want, and that's the reason why they pitch those out there. It's one of those where they're gonna keep complimenting until somebody feels compelled to honor that back, whether it's by overturning a disciplinary, extra tray of food, whatever the case may be. But you can rest assured that a convict doesn't just compliment your skills and abilities unless there's an end game involved.
Yeah, and guys, this may be one of the compliments. Someone here could be a sincere compliment. Obviously, physical appearance should never be considered sincere. You need to nip that. But you could have an inmate that really does admire the way you hold things down or whatnot. But again, the biggest thing here is if it's used almost all the time. Like if that's something that they just try to keep on using, then the problem is it becomes very superficial. And then I think the twist on this, Russ, and tell me if you agree, the twist on this is that they could wind up now, without you realizing it, take those compliments to where you're now looking for approval to do your job. Because what they could do is they could adapt those skills and abilities and apply it to how they want it to be applied, and not technically how it should be applied. Would you agree with that, Russ?
Yeah, one of the things that I really wanted to get into on this part of it is in the line of work that I'm in now, where I'm more focused on rehabilitation and reentry and not having a badge, and some of the things that have been proffered in the past by whether it's, through the political realm or through, administration, managers, and so forth, is the idea that, we should be modeling pro-social behavior for the inmates to see. And while I agree with that, the fact that you pointed out to people and say, "Hey, guys, go out there and we're not just correctional officers, but we're rehabilitators," I think lends itself towards being leveraged in a way that it's shouldn't be meant to. If you're out there and you are trying to model pro-social behavior, and you're told that that's what you should be doing, then what's the problem with accepting some of that back? Because you're just doing what you're being told. And so I think that there's some mixed signals that people are getting, and they don't even realize that they're mixed necessarily. And so we have to be very much, on guard about, what label it is that we're wearing. Should we even be involved in the deeper parts of rehabilitation? And I think that that's, something that really needs to be looked at and looked at hard. Here in California, they're trying to go hard into the Norway, model of, doing corrections differently. We all want different outcomes from what we're used to seeing in corrections, but that doesn't mean that we can afford to be complacent or to make bad judgments on things that correctional officers, the ones who are the teeth behind the system, to just let that go and just say, "Hey, now everything is going to be, fuzzy." We've seen too many serious, violent incidents, inside prisons all across the United States. But, in California, you had an inmate get up inside the control booth and disarm an officer and take her rifle away and sexually assault her. And so the idea that, hey, we need to be, fuzzier, more, more, I don't know, pro-social modeling in front of them. Be careful what you ask for, because it can cause us to drop our defenses, become complacent, and put the public at risk, put ourselves at risk, and put even other inmates at risk. So I think that that's worth saying.
Yeah, and guys, with the Vicky White and Casey White scenario, he does compliment, or even the other inmate that's on the show, the former inmate, also compliments. But remember, they compliment her skill and ability based on their terms, based on their interpretation. That basically calling her a mom figure and how much she cares for the inmates. And if you're to go deep into that dialogue and say, well, what do you mean by how much she cares for the inmate? You could start seeing some of the stuff she's doing is not within her prescribed role, but it's how they interpret it. So I think I truly agree that the compliments for the skills and ability may start off with something generalized, something that you will relate to because it's within your defined role, but then they start to kind of slowly pull you out of it. So if you guys watch the special again, at least those that are in the audience as well, is watch how they say, oh, she cared, and they use that to explain how good of an officer she is. But then the question is going to be, well, you got to tell me more of what she's doing, because is she doing it in the role of an officer, or is she just doing it in the role of the relationship she's developed with Casey? And now she kind of has to play that role, because if she doesn't, there's people that can turn her in. Like Russ said, there's leverage created. So of course she's being really nice to everyone. It's kind of hard for her not to be at this point. So the other thing they could also compliment on is character and values. Now this is unique because for me, character and values, yes, don't get me wrong, they got to translate in your behaviors 100%. But the meaning behind those usually could be subjective. And when you have inmates that are pretty much able to define why you do things, why, it's like, okay, well, that may be pretty personal. I'm not going to, if an inmate says, hey, I love the way you do your rounds, and, why do you do your rounds so efficiently that way? It's like, okay, don't you worry about that. Just know I do my rounds. I'm not, I'm willing to tell a trainee that. I'm willing to tell my peers, my bosses, but I'm not willing to break any bread and tell you why, because that opens up the door. Because even with that little dialogue of, why it could say in that little dialogue what you value, what it is that's behind the curtain, Like I don't need to answer why to an inmate. Just know it's being done. For the character and values, I got flattery directed towards moral qualities such as kindness, generosity, or integrity is especially effective if the target prides themselves on these traits, making them more vulnerable to manipulation. I want to mention something here. So like even if let's say an inmate didn't get their meal, and I know they didn't get their meal, and it's like, okay, you know what? Let me go ahead and make sure this inmate gets his meal. I give the inmate the meal, and the inmate will come back and interpret it like, oh man, Ganji, thank you for doing that. That was very nice of you, very generous of you, very kind of you. And I'm saying like, no, that was my job. You didn't eat. Like I don't need all the other fluff there. You didn't eat. So I'm something. Well, if it was other officers, they wouldn't do it. My job was to give you the tray, not because I'm generous, not because I'm kind. It's my job to give you the tray because you didn't eat. So I think what happens here is same thing as skills and abilities is that they eventually interpret it their own way. And then you wind up slowly starting to drift from how you really are, who you really are towards going towards their way. And then eventually, sadly, seeking their approval. And I think that truly is a game that is employed a lot. What's your thoughts on this, Joe?
Yeah, this is where the inmate uses the word trust a lot. You know, I won't let anybody else deliver my tray except for you, Ganji, because I trust you. You know, when they start complimenting you on your values and your character, they're entirely too close to the gamut. They're too close to the officer. You know, like, and exactly like you said, there shouldn't be compliments just because an officer is strictly just doing their job. If the inmate's doing that just because an officer is doing their job, again, there's an end game there. They've already sized the officer up. They're pitching things out there to see what's going to stick. You know, if you perform your job functions in a firm, fair, and consistent manner, you know, you shouldn't be receptive to any kind of compliments when it comes to your character, your work ethic, you know, your values amongst the inmate population. You know, they don't need to verbally express any kind of gratitude or any kind of, you know, any kind of compliments towards you, because the way you run your facility, you're going to know by the tone of the facility if there's a respect value there. You know, if you walk into a pod and the noise automatically just drops quiet, you know, it's because that you're firm, fair, and consistent in your duties. Same thing when you walk on a cell block. If you walk on a cell block and everybody's taking their towels and light covers and you know, stuff down, it's not because, you know, you're there to get compliments, because you're already respected for who you are and what your values are. So the inmates know that, you know, you're not the one to be messed with to begin with.
Yeah, and guys, remember, compliments like these are not attention-seeking comments. The inmates these are validation. These are internal. So, I mean, you know, to talk about someone's character and values, their skill at doing the job, you know, these are things that we will internalize. So I think the inmates also know the weight behind that. It's not as superficial as a physical flattery. What's your thoughts on this, Russ?
So one thing that I look into this and think about with regards to, you know, character and values is this. You know, inmates will often focus on, you know, the kindness and the mercy aspect of character and values. And they will praise you for being kind and for being merciful. But they're not going to praise you for holding people to be accountable. And the opposite of mercy is justice. They're not going to praise you for engaging in justice and holding their feet to the fire and holding them accountable and writing them the charge when they get it. No, they're only going to praise you when you decide to go ahead and just, you know, drop the situation. They're only going to praise you when you let something slide. They're only going to praise you when you just say, hey, you know what? This time I'm only giving you a verbal warning. that's when they heap on the praise. That's where they tell you how fair you were, and how kind you were, and how understanding, and how level-headed. And that's why they respect you. And so you should take that under advisement and know that those things, run the gamut and end as soon as you do hold them accountable. And it's a form of manipulation. You are being gaslighted into doing the very thing that they want, which is to not hold them accountable, to let things slide, to just overlook things, and to let the status quo be the status quo. So, it's like a form of verbal propaganda, if you will. They will tell you what you want to hear and then hope that by you hearing it, that you will adhere to it and let them go every single time. Hey, busted you this time. Let's not let it happen again. Yes, sir. And that's all the further it ever goes. So just know that there is a real reason behind when they heap this praise on you for your alleged moral character, because you are just throwing justice to the wind, and you're just, involved in kindness and mercy.
Yeah. And guys, again, just going back to the Casey White, Vicky White thing, I still think, the moral, the character, the values, whatever it is, it's still filtered through their perspective, so it has to meet their end game ultimately. And the moment you don't, they go to attack you based on those internalized character values that they gave you. They what they'll do is they've made a shift. So and it's funny because like we said before, the character or the values could be you're kind. I didn't say you're nice. Nice is superficial. I said you're kind. Now the moment you got to tell me no, like Russ said, you're no longer kind. So that value's gone. Then you may say, well, wait a second, hold on. And now you're trying to go back and defend that value, where it's like, what, you're too involved. This is a hard part about this part of the manipulation game, because it's weird, because like, as I said, for physical compliments, you can cut it off. For this, it could be sincere or not. So like Russ said, and I think Joe said, you got to know where it's going. That's
and they'll always come at you with this. Well, I thought we were better than that. Is there a mouse on my show? Is there a mouse in my pocket? See, look, I can tell just by looking at Joe. Joe's heard that a million times come out of their mouths. I thought we were better than that, Joe.
Yeah,
I thought we was better than that.
I thought me was better than that, Lieutenant.
Those partnership words. We,
yes.
us. Yeah. And then the adverse, them. Them.
Yes.
You're not like them. And then so this one's a good one too. I also got accomplishments and successes. I'm thinking when you just make rank. This actually plays very well for Casey and Vicky, because she is someone that did move up and was very successful within that jail setting. But again, if you make rank or something, and the inmates could outright congratulate you, and I get it, that's fine. Or they could basically kind of hold that title, over your head a little bit. I mean, as soon as you make sergeant, whatever, now you got more power. So now, there are going to be a lot of inmates that may come at you at that point to try to see where they can maneuver. And they'll be the first one to want to shake your hand and congratulate you, and then maybe even offer you their assistance if you need anything, just to help you smooth into that next role. And it's like, I don't need any help. If I got my officers here, I'm good. I appreciate the kind words, but I'm good. So you do you, I'll do me. But I noticed that this does happen a lot. But again, it's hard because it's not as easy to say, hey, I don't want you complimenting me on my success or my accomplishments. You could see it. Here I am. One day I'm wearing silver. Next day I'm wearing gold. And, it's easy to see. But with that said, I got to lean on what Russ said. But you may not be able to stop it because it's kind of, it's awkward. Okay, so you commented on my accomplishment. I appreciate that. But you got to know what the end game can always be. Where, again, if it was physical, don't say that again. Hold them right in their spot. Where if it's something like this, it's tough. It's not that easy to say, hey, don't compliment me anymore about how good my skills are. You know, it's just more of, okay, I got you, but I'm confident in who I am. But thank you. I appreciate your words, and keep it moving. What's your thoughts on this, Russ, the accomplishments and successes?
Yeah, you know, these are all just little things that they will try and use to leverage in there, to be able to, you know, throw the compliment in there, throw the flattery, you know, throw the bullet point at you, hope something sticks, come back later, reap the rewards of it. You know, whether that's, you know, letting them go on a charge, or, you know, not searching them as thoroughly, or doing them some kind of solid favor because we like that. So, you know, I think that, you know, within the bounds of a true pro-social interaction, maybe that's a good thing, but just recognize who you are, recognize who they are, and give it its due value and its due weight and nothing more.
Yeah, I think that's the key. I like what you said, you know, maybe good for some level of pro-social engagement, but at one point, you know, you just got to know where it's headed. What's your thoughts on, and by the way, just so you know, usually they may even try to come to you and be one of the first to congratulate you because it sets an initial impression, you know, and that initial impression could be very powerful. But what's your thoughts on this, Joe?
Yeah, you know, it's an awkward situation because, you know, the person who, let's just say, got promoted is still kind of taking it all in, and, you know, kind of stoked about the promotion. They just got their brand new pins, and you know, the staff are congratulating them as they walk down the hallway, and, you know, the inmates try to get in on it too. You know, it's just one of those awkward moments. I remember when I promoted from sergeant to lieutenant, you know, I got a bunch of high fives from my staff in the hallway, and the inmates started making a little bit of noise about it. I see you, Lou. I see you, Lou. And, you know, I turned around and I said, have y'all lost your goddamn minds? I said, nothing's changed. Get off that noise in my hallway. Get your hands behind your back and bump it behind that yellow line and keep it moving. And, you know, that's kind of all it took for me. And, you know, they knew I didn't change because of, you know, the rank I became. You know, and there was times where I watched a guy who got promoted from lieutenant to captain, came out in the hallway, and he's showing off his new railroad tracks, and, you know, he's proud of who he is, and, you know, inmates are coming up and fist bump them in the hallway, and I just, man, all I could do was just shake my head. You know, it's just one of them things. If you need validation from an inmate because, you know, you just made captain, man, we're in a world of hurt.
That's true.
Agreed.
And guys, as I said, I mean, that's why it's good for us to support each other as we're moving up, because I do believe at some point, even though people might say it, it's not so much attention, but maybe validation. You know, maybe it's good to hear that, you know, hey, it's good that you're in this position. But for us, we need to be careful who we hear that from. Yeah. And I think and we'll get to it, but the big part of this, I got two more areas first to cover, and then I have another thing about talking about the target and its vulnerability, is how we internalize these things and how this can be strategically employed against us. This is one that's used all the time, uniqueness and specialness. This basically, to me, is kind of what Russ mentioned before. You know how we had the partnership words, us and we? Well, this is the them side. You know, this is when they start to push for the uniqueness and specialness based on, you know, whatever they feel fit. You know, it may start, well, you're the only person that does your job correctly. Well, explain to me what that means to you. I would love to know what that means to you, you know, because we may have two different meanings here. But right now you're saying I'm unique. Okay, unique in what way? I'm very curious to see how you believe that I'm unique. Why? Because, you know, an officer was going to, let's say, write you up, whatever it was, but maybe I thought that there was a misunderstanding here, not because I was looking to try to benefit you, but because maybe the rookie was a little bit out of line. I don't know. But the point is, why do you think that I'm unique? Do you think that I did this for you, or do you think I did this for him? Or her? That's the question. You know, do you think that maybe me correcting the matter because maybe this issue went into your benefit? Do you think that that's why I corrected it? Do you think I corrected it so you could benefit from it? Or do you think I corrected it because it was the right thing to do? You know,
no, because you're not like all the others.
Yeah.
You're not like all the others, Anthony.
But Russ, it's funny
I
because
mean,
it's funny, Russ, because when let's say we do something that is correct and the inmates go to benefit from it, I think it's very good for the officer at that point, whoever makes the adjustment, to not let the inmates start opening that door to, oh, you're unique because everyone else would have done this and done that. I would quickly say, hold on, I didn't do it because I wanted to strictly give you guys the win. I did it because that is the right thing, and this required a bit of correction. I like to automatically make sure people can separate what I needed to do from who I needed to do it for.
and I think it's worth the instruction to them. By the way, I think I don't think that you are required to give an explanation, but I think under certain circumstances you should give an explanation and say, hey, the reason that I did this is X, Y, and Z, and it's not about you and me and our past and about, hey, I thought we were better than that and all that stuff. This is the right thing to do, or at least this is something where we both get to benefit. It doesn't have to be, where someone's, always the winner and always the loser. Both of us can benefit sometimes from some give and take. But I think that, explaining it to them, because many times these individuals have only been exposed to and only engaged in antisocial behaviors. And so sometimes when they are engaged in something that's no longer antisocial behavior, sometimes the light will click on a little bit for them. I'm not saying always or all the time, but it can actually be helpful for them. And it can sometimes set rapport, and people know how much I hate that word because it evaporates the instant you hold them to the fire. But sometimes you can establish a type of rapport that facilitates you being able to do your job better. And so sometimes in those situations, it may be worth that little extra bit of effort.
Yeah, and guys, I like what we're saying here. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do, not because it specifically benefits those individuals. Because one of the key things about this game right here, this uniqueness and specialness, especially when it comes to manipulation, however this can be applied to real life, and this definitely pays out in Vicky White and Casey White, is you wind up doing your job based on those terms. So you basically wind up doing your job based on their approval. Because now it's like, well, wait, now if you're starting to pull me away from the pack, then eventually I'm going to start doing things that the pack isn't doing, that the rest of my peers are not doing. And then you're going to keep on pushing the uniqueness and specialness. It's like, wait a second, why don't you just say that I'm not doing my job correctly then? Because if I'm always doing things uniquely and special, that means, and that's because I'm doing things different than everybody else, then maybe I need to find out truly what it is that I'm doing wrong. Because I mean, I'm very uncomfortable with that label. What's your thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, as far as this one goes, it can be uniqueness and specialness for the pros or the cons. It's the difference between, oh, Lieutenant, you're the only one that enforces that rule, or Lieutenant, I'm glad somebody's finally enforcing that rule. It's a 50-50 shot as far as this topic's concerned. I remember specifically one incident where as a correctional officer, I was doing channel checks in the day room where they vote and majority vote gets the channel, and that I did that, and I do it every hour on the hour, and they're like, some of them were like, you're the only one that does this. We don't get to see this. We don't get to see that. Or the other half was, I'm glad somebody's finally doing it. I'm tired of these guys running the TV. And, you just kind of tell them, this isn't nothing new. This is something that you guys know has been in place for years prior to me getting here. I said, nothing's changed because I got here. Ultimately this is my day room. And I'm going to conduct it as such, and, from that point on, I'd never heard anything about, the day room, anymore. But, it's like I said, when it comes to the uniqueness and specialness, it could be either way. You're the only one that enforces this, or nobody else enforces this. I'm glad you're enforcing it. it's not so much awkward as it is as long as you're doing what you're supposed to do, and following your proper policies and procedures. Where it comes to the offender population, you really shouldn't have an issue with this.
And guys, remember, if you're doing things the right way, let's say, and let's say maybe your peers aren't, and there has to be some correction, work on finding that consistency. Because I think that uniqueness and specialness is kind of like that us versus them. It's the initial effort to try to build separation. I truly believe that. And then once you separate, to bring you over to their side. So if there is something that you're doing differently that you maybe believe that it should be done this way, then try to bring that consistency, or maybe you have to correct yourself. But I like what Joe's saying, because there are some times where they could point out something that should be done that's not being done. But at that point here, I'm not going to leave that dialogue between just me and the inmate. I'm going to call my supervisor. I'm going to see what's going on and try to bring that consistency to the table. One is because I don't want to be singled out in any way or form, but also I don't want to do the bulk of everyone's work either. I'm going to be a little selfish in that manner too. I don't want to do the bulk of everyone's work. So if I have someone singling me out, saying that you're the only one that does it, well, why am I the only one that does it? That's weird. I'm sorry, that's weird. Hold on. You're saying I'm the only one that does that? No one else does that? Okay, let me figure that out. Because I want them to make sure when they go to employ that type of manipulation that you automatically go to the default, which is not to them, but this way. So anytime you try to push that divide, hey, I'm not gonna let the uniqueness want to push me further away. I'm going to go back to here and try to build consistency. If I'm doing things that are different, I got to find out why, or I have to correct, if there is a concern. But this is a game that opens up that door to the divide and conquer manipulation. And I definitely saw this with, as I said, Vicky White and Casey White, because that uniqueness, that specialness, whatever those efforts are, because usually when they define uniqueness and specialness, it's usually something that it's a behavior, it's an effort, it's a rule that you may be forgiving on, whatever the case may be. So the point is, I would definitely ask, well, why do you think I'm unique? Why do you think I'm special? And find that if you start to get them to answer those questions, you'll find that whatever it is, it's to benefit them. Has nothing to do with the right thing. It's to benefit them. And that to me is the moment that at that point where I decide that I'm going to do the right thing, but at that point it doesn't benefit them, I'm no longer unique. I'm no longer special. I'm just like one of them. Well, thank you, because I always was one of them. And the last one I got is about relationships in this part. So this is, I've seen it where they manipulate to try to say basically how you have such a good rapport with the inmates, how you're that person that all the inmates seem to go to. So I thought maybe I can go to you. And what they do is they try to put that rapport with the inmates, and however it's being maintained, over your prescribed role. Now, granted, in a perfect world, because remember, this is subjective, the prescribed role and what the inmates see as a benefit should be aligned. But subjectively, it may not be. Subjectively, inmates may not want what we are doing. I mean, it may not like those rules that we have to put in play. So again, this someone that comes up and basically starts off by saying, "Hey, I heard I can go to you because you're fair." Well, explain fair. Define that. What does that mean? Like, I just want to know what that means. So before we have this dialogue, I want to make sure we're on the same page and what that word fair means. But with that said, basically they try to basically put the relationship over your prescribed role. So the moment they do that, you just say, hold on a second, let me just switch something around here. Prescribed role, and then everything else underneath. So what's your thoughts on, I'll go with Joe first and Russ.
Yeah, it's weird because I've seen people over the years establish, I almost don't want to say the word camaraderie, but say like, maintenance officers that have convicts that work for them for a length of time. They know they can do the job. They know they do a good job. So eventually they tend to kind of get away from the correctional structure and tend to treat them more like a distant friend, which can become dangerous, and as we've seen, back in, I guess that was around 2001, 2002, when we had the Texas 7 escape. The maintenance convicts been in that same job for God knows how many years, with the same maintenance bosses, and they were able to get into an outdoor, they were able to take the correctional officers hostage, get a vehicle through the back gate, get up in the picket, and hold the back gate hostage open while these 7 guys escaped with a vehicle. It's one of those things that you have to be mindful. Even if you knew the person in the free world, you've got to keep the mindset of the keeper and kept, because eventually it's going to turn into a dangerous game where it could cost somebody their job or their life. You should never let somebody's job function as an inmate overrule the fact that they are an inmate. When it comes down to it, they're still an inmate at the end of the day. When they're done with their job, you still got to lock them in their house. And that's where a lot of people, have a hard time distinguishing and drawing that line.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on that, Russ?
Yeah, it's one of those things that you have to be intentional and mindful of. One of the unique things about corrections is these are people that we deal with on a daily basis, and when you deal with people on a daily basis, there's a bigger potential for lines to be crossed. And I don't care who you are. I would have as the unit officer and as the disciplinary officer, I would have upwards of 10, 11, 12 inmates working for me. And it required, that I keep their time cards, that I supervise what they were doing, that they were giving me their best with regards to things, because they could make my life holy hell if I didn't, supervise them properly and hire ones that were get up and go types that would, go process all of my paperwork, bring it back to me. I didn't have to worry about that. And so you do develop a relationship of one kind or another. I think that the safety aspect of that is develop a supervisory relationship with them, where you have clear boundaries, where you are clearly the boss, where they are clearly subservient and subordinate to you, and that you watch, where the lines are being drawn. It's a different thing, I had, and I think this is a problem in a lot of correctional areas, because sometimes these guys would clerk for me for years at a time. I think that it's a much safer thing to probably change people in and out, especially if you're on higher yards and stuff, just so that no one gets too comfortable, and just so that there are fewer chances for them to identify vulnerabilities in personnel, vulnerabilities in plant operation, and other vulnerabilities as far as safety and security. So, and there's a lot to be said, because, like I said, is you are going to develop relationships, and that's because we're human. But it's being able to manage those relationships within their prescribed roles, with you as the corrections professional and them as the inmate professional. So it's something that, if you find yourself getting out of pocket, too quickly, being too friendly, being too chummy, having conversations that are not about what's going on at work. Hey, yeah, the Raiders did great. Talking sports, talking this, that, and the other thing. Those things should be shouting danger in your ear.
Yeah, and guys, I want to 2 other things before we go to close. We can kind of combine them all, but I want to kind of discuss when it comes to flattery. And again, we talked about attention and validation, so maybe we can just briefly go over that. But the first part basically is what manipulators may choose for, or what manipulators may choose when they look for a target in regards to those that seek attention or those that seek validation. I figure when I cover those areas that we covered, the physical appearance is pretty much simple. I mean, for me, I think inmates kind of, they read people well. Manipulators in general read people well. And I think when it comes to people that seek attention, it's very superficial in nature. And sometimes, sadly enough, I've seen it where inmates can find, let's say, an officer who dates around, that they know that the officer is always coupled up with another officer, and they know somewhere along the line maybe this person does like attention, and they just roll the dice, and next thing you know, there's a game that's employed. But how these games work is when your want for attention or your want for validation kind of supersedes all logic, supersedes all motivation. You know, once it gets to the point where that is what you're seeking for in this environment, now you're giving the inmate ultimately, or the manipulator, the control that they'll eventually have to create the leverage that will be able to get you to do what they want. So it goes from control to power. And how these work, guys, especially with the attention, is I give it and I give it and I give it and I give it, and you absorb it, you internalize it, and then I stop giving it. So now you're used to a routine. The routine doesn't happen. And now you want to go back to that routine. And now the problem is, when you want to go back to that routine, what are you willing to do? That's the quid pro quo that Russ mentioned. What are you willing to do to keep things at that, what you consider your status quo, which, by the way, you're far beyond that status quo, but that's what your norm is. So now you're going to seek balance. And how do you seek balance? You seek balance by trying to get what the inmate's been giving you, or trying to get what the manipulator's been giving you. So the person that's manipulating, whether it's the superficial physical compliments, or whether, like, for attention, or whether it's the higher level compliments, but technically deal more with validation, they give it to you until you crave it, and then they take it away, or worse yet, or they withhold it, or worse yet, they take it away. And when they take it away, now it's just the opposite. So, and usually when that's done, that's more of the aggressive side. That's more of like, I'm giving you compliments, and all of a sudden I start to lessen you, but literally speaking, dehumanizing you, whatever it is, no longer giving you compliments, giving you just the opposite of compliments. Now it's no longer you seeing, hey, what's going on here, but rather, what have you done wrong? And now that's where the power comes from. I may have had control at the very beginning when I withhold the compliments, but when I start to do the opposite of giving you compliments and I start to attack you, now it's, what did you do wrong? And now you're chasing after it. Now I have power because you're willing to do whatever I want you to do to maintain that balance, what we've created. And I think, again, Russ, I'll have you go first when it comes to that target. I think they know who may seek attention or validation, but just in a very unhealthy way.
Yeah, that point well taken on that. Some of the things that you can see manipulators doing with regards to that is, becoming offended, and it may be genuinely be offended, but more often than not, it's all about pretense. And so, when you have the pretense of being offended by something that somebody did, then you are put in that position where you have righteous indignation. And yes, they should feel bad. They should feel guilt. And guilt at what cost? Guilt at doing things outside the boundaries of things that they should be doing, get back in your good graces. And so, this is all stuff like if you read some of the stuff, Robert Greene and things like this, it's it's obvious the way that these things can be planted in people's minds, and then suddenly they're chasing in the opposite direction, trying to get back in the good graces, trying to get things back to the status quo once again. And so, what is that person to do? They step outside of their prescribed role.
Russ, what you said is so spot on, because we talked about how these are strategically employed. I mean, the key is giving it to you and then taking it away. But I truly believe that when it gets to the point where you're, well, first it's giving and withholding. Let's make sure people know that's first. It's given, and then you withhold it, and then ultimately you could take it away. Now, granted, if you look at the level of this, and it's so true on how it plays out, because you feel that you're being pulled. You know that you're being controlled. I think the first step is pull. That's the withholding part. I'm pulling you. You know, I didn't give you any compliments. You don't know if you did anything wrong. Maybe I'm just having a bad day. So your approach is more about curiosity. And I think there's a pool there. I think there's a pool there. But when it gets to the point where it's the takeaway, where, man, I thought you were like, I thought you were different. I thought you weren't like everyone else. But now you're taking away all the compliments that you've given this person. Now this person goes into thinking, what have I done wrong? Now look at what the mindset is. You can even say gaslighting, all this stuff. Look how the mind shifted. It's no longer what they've done wrong for the agency. The agency's second. I don't care. What have I done wrong by you? What have I done wrong by you? So now you start to chase it in an effort to fix it. The agency is not even in the equation no more. You know, your priority, you're no longer in the equation anymore. And you want to see, if you look at how crazy this shift is, if you want to look at it from extremes, you go this person that's flattering you, that's building you up, throwing everything at you. And maybe it's self-esteem, whatever you're connecting to. But then the opposite side of that is when you don't just, when you withhold it, but when you do the opposite, when you start to now go after them, it is literally it's total control. It's total control. It's strategically played because you're yearning for it, because at one point, maybe you feel that now you need this as an approval. You know, because and who's approval? Not the agency, the approval of the inmate or whoever's doing the game. But the point is, it's so strategic in their effort, because you go from feeling good to now feeling guilty. Let's say, you know, so it's crazy how it's emotional manipulation. It literally is emotional manipulation, and it can be so unbalancing. What's your thoughts on that, Joe?
And that's the reason why I think they need to, I think academies and classes, and I think they need to focus a lot more on manipulation tactics. You know, that should be just a course during the pre-service, you know, academies just in itself, to be able to recognize signs. You know, it's one of, you know, I used to tell my cadets, you know, if you're seeking any kind of validation, get a dog. The dog will give you all the validation you need. You know, you do not need to seek any kind of validation or any kind of achievements from this offender population, because it's something that'll be used against you. It may not be today, may not be tomorrow, but I promise you it'll be at some point in time. You know, I don't understand. Well, I mean, I understand that they have a syllabus to go by, but I think a lot of these academies need to spend more time on manipulation tactics, role playing. You know, not just on the what ifs and how to's, but they really need to put a strong emphasis on manipulation tactics, you know, when it comes to offenders. Because, you know, especially in the case of the Vicky and Casey White, I just don't, you know, man, how did this go so bad? That, you know, it seemed like nobody in the department recognized the signs until it was too late, until it was said and done. You know, I just, it fathoms me how quickly this situation evolved, and, you know, how much it evolved in a short time span.
Yeah. And guys, you know, what's funny about this is inmates also, or manipulators, know how to play the game where it's no longer about right or wrong. It's more about you defending your position, which takes your mind off of what is right or wrong. You know, so it's you're getting this argument going back and forth, and now it's more about you defending yourself. I remember an incident recently where, you know, there was an inmate that whatever, let's say, wanted status and couldn't get status, so that when he goes to justify that he believes he's not getting status because of discrimination, and you wind up, you know, literally spending so much effort trying to defend that they're not being discriminated, where it has nothing to do with anything. It's like, okay, well, that's how you feel. I can't control how you feel. But I'm not being down that path. Just, this is what it is. Sorry about that. And then you keep moving. Like, I'm not, you know, the funny thing is sometimes they create these shifts that are very strategically distraction. They're placed to be distractionary. And now the problem is you remove yourself so far away from what needs to be done, or the dialogue that needs to be had, that you spend all this energy trying to prove that you're not discriminated. It's like, nah, guys, why go into that weeds? Just, okay, that's how you feel. Sorry you feel that way. Prove it. Prove it. Excuse me? Prove it. That's all I'm asking. Prove it. Hey, Joe, you have anything you'd like to say in close? It was a good dialogue, I thought. Covered a couple things.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. You know, it should hopefully open some people's eyes to see, you know, how an everyday normal job, you know, not just in corrections, but I mean, anybody who's a leader or a supervisor and got subordinates, you know, can kind of see how they may be getting manipulated into giving employees what they want that they don't normally get. You know, in the corrections profession, you know, you give them an inch, they'll take a damn mile. You know, so recognize the signs of manipulation, you know, have a higher self-esteem for yourself, higher integrity for yourself. Never let, you know, the only person that should feel good about you is you. Nobody else should have to do that for you. And you shouldn't have to seek that externally from anybody. You know, even in marriage, you know, it's nice to hear it. But in the end game, you know, the only person I can feel good about me is me. So, you know, never let especially in the corrections profession, never let somebody externally raise you up or, you know, pump you up, because at some point, regardless whether it's an inmate or an employee, they're going to want something in the end run. There's always going to be an end game. So just be mindful of manipulation tactics. So
true. And Russ, what's your thoughts?
You know, in doing this, because we spend a lot of time on manipulation, and one of the reasons for that is because there's a certain amount of prevalency that occurs within corrections, and it's something that's really super dangerous. You know, in this particular part, you know, with the Vicky and Casey White, she lost her life. And, you know, even though what she did was horrible, and even though what she did was wrong, I don't think any of us, you know, really want to see people lose their lives over things like this. That's one reason why, you know, back when I started, you know, we had 1 or 2 classes on manipulation, and then everybody said, go buy games criminals play. So, all right. So I went out and did that, and I read through the book, and, you know, I kind of like understood the basics, but they didn't really do any good, solid foundational manipulation training for people. And then when you look at what's happened over the last, 35 years since I first got started in corrections, the training hasn't got a whole lot better. The access to good material, though, has really changed because we have the internet now. We have inmate manipulation decoded. We have the videos that Joe and Anthony and I have put on here. People that are in charge of their training departments, or that can talk to people who are in charge of their training departments, should be going, hey, you know what? We need to step up our game. We need people to understand this better. And not just the people that, you know, wear a badge, but the people who come in and deal with inmates on a regular basis. I don't want to see anybody else die. I don't want to see anybody else lose their liberty. I don't want to see anybody else, be put in that kind of position and do things that are, you know, going to get, you know, other people hurt or killed or fired from their jobs, as it were. So, you know what? Take what we've said to heart, but then on top of that, take this that we've provided here, and present it in a training class. And, I see no reason why we wouldn't be amenable to even doing something, you know, more contoured or customized for that. But you've got to train your people. And if you're not training your people on this topic, shame on you.
I feel like Russ went into witness protection mode.
I know, he's all blacked out, and
yeah, you got to change your voice.
Hey, well, so those that don't know is that's what it's like here, living in my house right now, because it's still torn apart for 4 months. 4 months. It's been hell. Not living here, but living everywhere. We had to move like 4 or 5 times, and now we're back here, and there's no floor. There's no kitchen. Anyway, it's a mess. But
you're in purgatory now. No longer hell.
I am,
He's in
and I must
solitary.
have done something really, really bad. Really, really bad.
Well,
You know,
guys,
and
what is
I
it, Joe?
just wanted to, well, just one last thing. You know, we were talking about manipulation, and you know, we were talking about the Casey and Vicky White thing. You know, the damn thing of it is, in the end run, Vicky White's dead behind bad choices, and I guarantee you, Casey White's already plotting his next victim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, guys,
I agree.
The people, their opportunities for a manipulator, there is no connection to the human element. There's no empathy. It's, you know, I mean, he did after she shot herself, he did say, check on my wife. And I thought that was very unique because my wife shows a sense of ownership, which means that maybe there was something there. But with that said, it was a series of bad choices. And you're right, that next opportunity, they jump on it. And for me, when it comes to manipulation, guys, you know, you gotta hold people to specifics. You know, you got to make sure that you create the boundaries and that everybody's in agreement with those boundaries, that you make sure that people know what those non-negotiables are. You know, and again, you know, when they throw out a word fair, it's like, well, I just want to make sure fair is we're on the same playing field when you say that word, you know, or whatever the word may be. Just make sure that you may be defending something and they're pulling you somewhere else. So we need to establish that definition of what you think is fair. Because I know a lot of people right now, when they go those back and forths with that manipulator, that's where they slowly start to kind of break their boundaries themselves. Because now they're trying to adjust their definition based on a resolution of an argument. Because they're more concerned with reconnecting, that they have now broke their own boundaries just to make an effort to reconnect. And now all of a sudden that boundary, I guess an example here, the word fair, it shifted. The definition got lost. Your definition got lost when you try to make the fucking resolution. Now it no longer means what you want it to mean. You know, so it's funny because most of the time when the manipulation starts and they try to kind of pull the flattery away, pull the compliments away, and then you're yearning to get it back, you actually think you're fighting for what that proper meaning is, and you're not. You're fighting for what their definition is, because ultimately your want to get that attention, your want to get that validation will cause you to sacrifice your boundary, your definition. And in this scenario here, the word fair, because even with Vicky White and Casey White, one last thing, guys, remember, she was the best officer, and everybody was saying all these things. But when inmates start to say, well, she was a great officer, and then you start to ask them, well, why do you think that way? Well, she cared. Well, how did she care? And most of the time when they see about care, it could be behind giving them extra food, which they're not supposed to get, or giving them extra things that they're not supposed to get. And a lot of us would say, well, maybe she really cares. Yeah, but for us in corrections, that's the first sign of manipulation. You know, technically she's not breaking the rules, but she kind of is being played a little bit. So, you know, just understanding what those definitions are matter. As always, guys, the show is shared. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify every time I post a video. Stay safe.